It looked like a dog, you know. They call it like the dog man or something. I mean, this thing was built. I mean, this thing was rugged. I mean, it's something I wouldn't want to tangle with it, you know.
One night, I'm sitting there and I had a dead body in my bed.
Yes, that's when I started hearing the doors opening and closing and then walking through the house.
It ate that woman's baby and killed her. He found it, he tracked it down, and he grabbed it and he impaled it on a stump.
Welcome to Myths, Monsters, and Mullets. I am your host, John Methenkamp. If you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share, you can email me at mythsandmullets@gmail.com. Follow me on Facebook, Spotify, and YouTube, Myths, Monsters, and Mullets. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, like, share, leave a comment, 5-star review, and that's the best way to grow the show. On tonight's episode, Rod from Lodge Tales Podcast returns for a one-on-one interview. We discuss the thing that I saw on the road, and we kind of get into a religious discussion. It's a little different than what you're used to, but I think you'll enjoy it. Welcome back to Myths, Monsters, and Mullets. We have a return guest, Rod from Lodge Tales Podcast. He's been in the live 3 times, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah. As far as a guest, he's been 3 times in the live, but he's a constant listener to the lives and contributes every time he's in there. So first I want to say welcome back. And why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell everybody about your podcast before we get started.
All right. I'll do that in the Blackfeet way first. Oki niksokoax, nitaniko xistakio tokan, toto hamskapi pikani. So I said, hello, friends and relatives. My name is Rod, and I'm from the Blackfeet tribe, the Southern Pikani band. That's basically what I said. In there, I did say my Indian name, but you can listen to that. That's my Indian name is Xistakeo Tokan. But anyways, so my podcast that I do is Indigenous ghost stories. You know, anybody that's an Indigenous person are the ones I reach out to, because I feel that niche isn't fulfilled very well in the podcast world today. So I'm doing my part to kind of fill that void and, center all my content around that kind of area, because we may have people that tell ghost stories from the Indigenous people that they've just pulled off the internet, right? Well, these stories in my podcast are first-hand accounts of the people on these different reservations that have had experiences with the paranormal and strange, Bigfoot, UFOs, things like that. So that's kind of where I'm at with that, and that's what I do.
So you're from the Blackfoot tribe. For a lot of my listeners, they may not know anything about the Blackfoot tribe. Could you maybe give us a little background and, where you're located, things like that?
Yeah, so we're located in northwestern Montana. We're right on the border to Canada, and we live on the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains in the foothills. And, it's just basically a triangular shaped landmass that we occupy there. And we're actually a confederacy. There are 3 bands in our tribe that make up the Blackfoot Confederacy. So when you hear people say, are you Blackfoot? Well, technically, yes, I would say that. But I'd say in particular, I'm from the Southern Pikani band. I'm Pikani, but we're in the South. We also have part of our band in Canada, the Northern Pikani. But I'm the Southern Pikani, and we're the ones that refer to ourselves as Blackfeet, plural. And Blackfoot is technically a band up in Canada called the Siksika. Those are the Blackfoot. And there's also the Kenai, which are the Bloods. That's the other band. So you got the Bloods, the Blackfoot and the Piikani are the three bands that make up the Blackfoot Confederacy. It's kind of confusing, but we just say we're Blackfeet, and then we'll know, oh, so they're from Montana. If somebody was to approach me and say, "Oh, I'm Blackfoot." "Oh, really? You're from Standoff, huh? The Reserve Standoff?" "Yeah, yeah, I'm from up there." And that's how we'd kind of recognize one another. And so our tribe um, was was the main superpower of the plains. We're a plains culture, so that means that we migrated. We followed the buffalo. We never stayed in one place too long because we realized the impact that that had on the land, and so we would leave and we'd follow the herds of buffalo throughout our territory. And our traditional hunting territory was all the way in the North Saskatchewan River in Canada, down the Rocky Mountains, all the way down the Rocky Mountains until you hit the Yellowstone area. And then the Yellowstone River was our border to the east until it went so far. And then it went straight back up to the North Saskatchewan. So it was the bulk of Montana, down into Wyoming a little bit and all the way up into Canada. It was a huge, huge hunting territory that the three bands had together. And so we were one of the major superpowers. And once the horse came back, that's a story in itself. There were horses here before the Spanish brought them. There were horses, those old prehistoric horses. They were here too. Well, when horses came back in the 1700s, the Blackfeet basically just took off with all of this. It was like the golden age. We had horses. There was so much more we could do in an interesting way. Because when we say horses, we say Buno Kamita, and what that means is elk dog. So we use dogs, like we have this time frame we refer to as the dog days, and that's when we use those big old dogs that are like wolves. Those are that's the dogs we use to help us carry our teepees and things like that. All of our possessions from camp to camp. Dogs were a big part of that. So after that, basically was the horse days, and when the horses came back, they looked like an elk, but they were used as dogs. They were big like elk, run around like that, but they were used like dogs. So that's why we call them elk dogs. That's what it translates to. And so it's really funny in our language, everything translates twice. Like when I say I was to say, Ksakawa, how does it go? Ksakawawasi. If I was to say something like that, what I would be saying is a ground deer. um, but what I'm saying really is a spider. So you got to translate it twice. Yeah, awakasi's deer and ksa like that sound is low like ground. So awakasi. So when you say that, you're talking about a spider. So everything translates twice. It's kind of weird, but like not everything, but most of the stuff translates like that. Like if I was to just talk to you and say, "Oh yeah, my elk dog over here," you'd be like, "What? What are you talking about, elk dog?" "Oh, I mean a horse." But
Yeah.
it's kind of an interesting thing with the language and stuff, because most of us walk in a few different worlds that are natives. Like, for one, we walk in our world, of course, and then we come out off the res, which is like a foreign land to us, and we got to walk there too. And if you're a veteran, well, that adds another layer. You're also walked that road too. You're kind of in that world, so it's kind of a mixed bag. But anyways, our tribe finally we were the last tribe in Montana in this area to be put on to the reservations, and by 1865, I want to say 1866, one of those winters was referred to as starvation winter. See, because we were put on this last res, pushed up into the current res we are on today in 1855, and by 1865, starvation winter hit. The Indian agents didn't bring the rations and stuff because they had an agreement. You stop going out, hunting and taking off outside of this area, And we'll go ahead and give you guys rations. There'll be no need for you to leave, and you can start farming and ranching, and you'll self-sustain like that. And so that was one of the agreements, but they failed that winter. And so a bunch of my people starved to death. And by the end of that winter, there was only 2,500 of us left in the whole Confederacy. So I am descended from those 2,500 people. And within that, amongst all diversity and adversity and all odds that were against our survival, we were able to hang on to our traditions, our spirituality, language even. I mean, the medicines, all these things, we were able to hold on to it through that. When my grandpa would tell me stories about that time, there was I said, Grandpa, how did they make it through that time? He says, oh, it was really bad. He didn't go too much into it. He just said they were boiling their shoes and they were eating that leather. It got so bad. He says
Oh,
any kind of
wow.
leather they had, they would boil it and they were eating it. And he'd point out, he'd say, see that ridge right there? There's a mass grave up there. There wasn't enough time, or, families were wiped out of existence and there was nobody left to bury them. So there's a mass grave up there. We call that Ghost Ridge. And it's out by the old agency area. It's actually called Old Agency, this area. And it's right near there on top of the ridge. It's where there's a mass grave. But I want to say there was only 1,500 of us, the southern Piikani, and then up into the north there was only about 500 left of each band up there. It was pretty bad. It was really bad. Bad time.
So how many Blackfeet are there now?
Today there are around 20,000 of my tribe. I want to say it's higher than that. It's like 25 to 28,000, because on the res about half live and then off the res half live. And I'm not sure about the numbers in Canada, but they're significantly higher than what they were,
Yeah.
but a few generations ago. Yep.
So you touched on spirituality. Was Christianity pushed onto the tribe?
Yeah, they come with that, and I'll tell you something crazy about that. When they showed up and they were talking about their God, this spirit they called Jesus, um, they were asking about that spirit. It's like, well, what can he do? Like, what's his power? They were asking kind of like that, basically. And, oh, well, he could feed people, masses of people with doing a miracle. He can walk on water. And they were listening to him. That, really? That's all he can do? Like, yeah, they weren't very impressed, because different spirits that we don't consider gods can do these things, and then different men, and then the spiritual way, the holy way, they can do a lot of these different things. There's one story where this guy had medicine, and I don't remember exactly what time, like what era this took place in, but it's one of our stories. Um, he was pointing up at the rays that come off of the moonlight, those rays. He actually rode his horse up those. There were things they could do like that they had the ability to do. And it's not them, it's the spirits. It's all, comes from the Great Spirit, ultimately. But these different things that people would consider miracles, these guys would do. And they weren't very impressed with, because in those old days, what used to happen was a guy would go out, and for whatever reason, he was seeking out medicine or going on what you call a vision quest. We just call it fasting. So he was out fasting, and different spirits would come or not. But one of the times you might get lucky and you might get something to bring to the people to help. Well, during those times, they used to have these, I guess, like a display, like a display of what they can do. And in one of the stories, there was one group of men in this lodge, big lodge, all on one side, and then there was another group of men all on another side. Well, one of those men get up and he says, I'm going to make all of you guys on that side fall over on your side. immediately all of them ones start singing their protection songs. They all start getting ready, trying to ward off any power he had. And so this is one of the displays, and he starts dancing toward the door of that lodge. Just before he gets there, he'll stop. He'll dance back to where he was standing. He did that 4 times, and on that fourth time, he was just getting ready to step out of the lodge, and he looked back at all those men, and he just waved his arm across them, and they all fell over. All the people start cheering. Ah, look at that, look at that. And then as soon as that happened, he comes back in, he sits down, and a guy gets up from their side, and he starts running around all the men that were sitting there in the middle. He starts running around them, running around them. All of a sudden, he disappears. And everybody's like, what the hell? Where did he go? And just above them in those teepee poles where they all cross at the top at the smoke hole, up there is sitting that man, and he shapeshifted into a crow. And he's looking down at them all squawking, and everybody's like, ah! So they used to have these displays like that where what they're trying to do is get people to, I guess, follow them in a way. Like, hey, look, what I got is real. And if you think I can help in any way, well, then come with me. Help me do my ceremonies too. And we'll all benefit, right? And so that was the whole idea of it. But these things happened. And it wasn't just in my tribe. There were other tribes that had that medicine too. Not all tribes had medicine, but the ones that did, they had it like that. Not just us, the Lakota tribes, the Cree, all the different Crees, the Assiniboines, yeah, all of them. They all had it like that. It
Wow.
was really interesting, yeah. It's really interesting history.
So, one of the things that, is, I don't want to say popular, but it's kind of well known, is all around the world, it seems every culture has a flood story. Like Noah's Ark type flood story. Does your culture have that?
Yeah, yeah. There was a flood story. When that happened, we have a story of this muskrat is the one that went down, and when he went down, see, there was this being here, and he was here since before that flood time. And when he was here, we call him Old Man or Napi. And this is one of the Napi stories. But when he come up, see, because Napi, let me just describe who Napi is first. Napi was, so before the flood, there were people. And these people come from Mudman and Ribwoman in our Genesis stories. And Mudman, see, we're really literal on how things are. So Mudman, they say, was created, when Napi Natusi was here on this land, or the creator was here. He decided to create an image of himself. And the image he created was Mudman. And how he did it was he gathered up clay by the river and just shaped it. Then he blew life into it. And he came to life, and he started kind of stumbling around, didn't really know how to walk or anything. This was Mudman. And by this time, Napi Natusi could only come here during the new moon, when there was no moon in the sky. Those 4 days were the only time, and he would come down, and he would teach Mudman how to live. And in this time, there was no such thing as death. Death wasn't introduced yet. So these people lived a long, long time. And over time, as he was teaching them how to live on this world in balance and in harmony with everything, he got lonely. Mudman got lonely, and he asked the Creator if he could make him a companion. And that's when he put him to sleep. And in our story, he reached in and he grabbed his rib, and he created woman from that rib. That's Rib Woman. And it always blew my mind, like, how do you guys in the Bible know our story? Man, ours is like way older than your Bible. Like, our ways are like 40,000 plus years old. Like, how? Anyways, that's a whole different topic. But he creates his companion, and they start having children. And remember, there's no death yet. And so over time, the children, as they grew up, they started playing adult and they got kicked away, basically started having kids of their own. And they, hey, you're not supposed to do that. You guys got to go live over here now. And it just happened like that. It just kept happening. And people were, you know, populating everywhere. Well, it got to the point where Mudman and Ribwoman couldn't even visit all of their children, you know. It would take them all year to go to every one of their camps, and they even started developing their own languages. They couldn't even understand them after a while. And at that time, that's when she asked the Creator, can we have death so that these children, you know, value us more? They don't even come to visit us anymore, and we can't even go see them all anymore. And she was holding a baby at the time. They had a baby, her and Mudman, and he said, well, I tell you what, and they were sitting by this river, if I throw this buffalo chip into the water and it floats, things will stay the way they are. There will be no death. And she said, and so he threw it in, you know, it floated. And so, well, there it is. No, 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 that's not how it should be. How about we throw this rock in there? And if it floats, then it'll be as it should be. And he said, well, have it your way. And she threw that rock in there and it sunk. And so death became from that. And the first person to ever die in this world, according to our stories, was Mudman and Ribwoman's baby. It was the first one to die. She got her wish. She got her wish. And so because of all of this, all the children moving out and away, they lost their knowledge of the Creator. They didn't know anymore. And so this is when Napi was introduced. And he was almost like a direct copy of the Creator. He was so powerful when the Creator made him and sent him here. See, because he couldn't come here all the time and be here all the time, because he's only restricted to those 4 days of the new moon. And that's a whole story in itself, why that is. But as Napi appears here, he was really good. He was really, really a powerful person, and he created a lot of things. He created a lot of land, like different features in our land and all of this and that. Well, as he started teaching everybody how to live again, at some point the flood hit. And when the flood hit, there was like this one area where the people were kind of gathered, this one high area, and it was only thing there was just that little bit of rock pointing out of the water like that. And he called them all these animals to him. See, he was so powerful, he could talk to all these animals, and he was trying to get their help. One by one, they all failed. He was trying to get them to go dive into that water and to bring up more land. Well, they all failed except for the muskrat. He barely made it back. And when he did, he was almost dead, almost drowned. He had a little bit of dirt in his paw. And from that, he took it and he started creating more land, more and more for the people to live on. And that was also during the time when different languages were reintroduced, I guess you'd say, to everybody. Like everybody had a different language. It was also during that time. And as soon as everybody moved out and start reliving again, this is an interesting part of this whole saga, is that he eventually led a migration out of North America overseas somewhere, like led people over that way. And we think he did it by way of Alaska, and he went out that way. And over time, he eventually came back. And remember now, this is a long time that Napi was here. I mean, it's a long, long time, you know. And he eventually led a migration back here. And when he got back here, he noticed that some of the people that were left here were savage. They were cannibals, things like that. So he had to reteach them how to be real people again. That's where we get that term Nisitapik. Like, we are Nisitapik. We are the real people. That's how we refer to ourselves, you know. And that's what he had to do is teach them how to be real people again. And that's the interesting part, because science and all these other things say we originated from Africa and came here. Well, in our stories, that's only half the story. There was a whole time before that. And then, so to a lot of us, when we hear these guys say, oh, because they'll call us Chinese, they'll call us Mongolian. Yeah, you keep thinking what you want, but there's a history that's way older than we even remember as people. So whatever, we don't really listen to that. So we have our own way looking at the world
I,
and the history.
I think it's interesting that the your traditions and stories, there are a lot of parallels to Judaism and Christianity there.
Well, they say that those religions kind of gathered from everybody else around them and used them. That's what they say, but I don't know. Our ways are, well, this is how it was described to me. There are many paths to the same source. So not every religion, that doesn't mean they're wrong because they don't believe what you believe. They have their own path to the Creator. And that's all he wanted, was us not to forget him. So he has a different way for each, group of people of how to reach him and be with him and, know him, things like that. So we don't look at the Lakota way and say, oh, that's wrong, because they don't do their ceremony just like this, like we do. And they don't look at us and say the same thing. We respect that their way is powerful just the way that they respect that our way is, and we don't look down on it. That's a new thing, people looking down on how you believe. That's new. It wasn't like that before. But
Yeah, I think that applies to a lot of things, not just spirituality or religion.
mhm.
Yeah,
But I forget where we were going with that. Why I had to speak about Napi first. Why did I start talking about it?
I had brought up the flood story.
Oh, yeah, so that flood, and I did pass over that. That was during that time of that big flood. So we have stories of that too, and it's also, some of our stories are from the water days, which would be after a big flood too. We call the water days, and there was a lot of water on the earth, a lot everywhere. And a lot of our stories are from that too. So when we're looking back at history, we say, all right, well, there's the water days, there's the dog days, and then the horse days, and I don't know what we're at today, the cryptocurrency days. I don't know.
Yeah, that could be a very good way to put it. I don't know how you would say that in your language, but we'd have to
Yeah, I don't
translate it
know.
twice.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so that's a little backstory on your people, and kind of gives my audience a little viewpoint, into where you're
Hey,
coming from here.
I've thought of something. I've been always thinking about it. Can I kind of bring it up here real quick?
Absolutely.
So when people talk about these demons, they say, like how I look at it, because I don't really know, but they say they kind of look reptilian, but they're man humanoid kind of figures, and they look, they got claws, sharp teeth, kind of look reptilian, at horns and whatnot. Well, going back before Mudman and Ribwoman, they said that when the creator first made this planet, when he first made it, he gathered the stardust and he formed it into a ball and blew life into that. And that was actually the creator's first wife, was the earth. That's what they say in our way. And he could make himself small so he could go on it. And that's what they say he did. He made himself small and he started creating things like grass was like the first thing they say he created. And then flowers, all these, because he's seen lava. And when he seen that lava, he looked at it and there was the different colors and the stone after it kind of settled, obsidian. He was looking at those. I want to make something like that. So he started making all these, flowers and whatnot, and different things he would be down here. And at one point, he decided to create a life. And so, again, he took from the river the clay alongside the river and he kind of rolled it in his hand and it formed a shape like a snake. And he said that, when he blew life into that, and he said, I'm gonna have you live here first. And he gave it instructions on how to live on this earth to be, in balance with everything. Well, they didn't listen to him. And after a long time, they started growing legs. They started living out of balance to the way he wanted, it to be. And so he punished them. And they say the first time he punished them, he boiled the earth, is what he says. He boiled the earth. I'm thinking the ring of fire, all the volcanoes going off. And that's what he said he did. And when that happened, there was one female that had, eggs inside of her. And she crawled away from it all and escaped that destruction. And he found her. And he said, because he always trying to give things chances that he created. And when he gave her that chance, he said, from you more will come. You can try again. So life went on again, millions of years, and again they grew legs and they started, living out of balance. And so the second time, they say he flooded the earth to get rid of them, because there was too many and they weren't living the way he meant them to live. And again, one female was pregnant and she was able to escape all of that. And he seen her and did the same thing. He said, you know, you'll have another chance at this, but from here on out, um, when things see you, they're gonna try and kill you after this. That's it. And so that part of the history, all of a sudden, something happens. Something happens where the moon is formed. The moon. And that right there becomes his wife too. The moon is like his wife, right? So how that happens is that's kind of where we're at today is with that. Well, let me just say this. When they lived here, when his wife and his 7 sons lived here all together, they were the only family here. That woman ended up getting corrupted. That woman did. And that was actually his wife, the earth. That was his wife, right? So that was who that was. She got corrupted because a snake would come out. They'd go out to do their chores, but the snake would show up and it would morph itself into a man. And he seduced that woman. And the creator knew about it, but he was giving her a chance to come clean and stop doing her wicked ways that she was doing. And eventually he had to come up with a plan to do away with this wickedness. And so, because when he created her, he gave her almost the same amount of power that he had, but nothing's more powerful than him. So he made a plan and he acted like they're all going to go out to do their chores that day. And she was the last one to leave camp every day. And he snuck out he told his boys to hide in one area and he snuck over to that den where it would crawl out. She would stomp on it and he would come out and morph into a man. Well, he was telling her all these things like, oh, that creator, he's really an awful person. He'd done away with all of my people twice. Not just once, but twice. He's really a no good person. And so he goes over and he stomps on it. He comes out and he chops his head off and just leaves him there. And by the time his wife gets over and sees that, she is distraught. She is pissed. And she vows to kill every one of his boys to punish him. So she starts chasing him. All of them. And he stayed in the rear because he knew this was going to happen. And she was powerful. She could catch them. And they all start running from her. And so what ended up happening was he gave one of his boys a bladder full of air, one of them a bladder full of water, one a stick, one a rock, all of these different things. And so when she would get so close to them, they'd throw something back when the creator would tell him, like when he threw that stick, a big old forest so thick, couldn't get through, would come in her way. And she would eventually traverse that. And so they'd tell them to throw the rock, and a big old mountain range would appear. And she'd have to traverse that. And then, the air, big old tornado, something would hit where she couldn't get through. She'd finally get through that. It just kept going like that to where finally the only place they had to go was up. So they went up. And by the time they jumped into the sky, she was right behind him, and she jumps up to go after him. And at that point, she was somewhat distracted, and he threw his axe. That's what he was using. He threw his axe, and he chopped her leg off. And when he did that, he started stripping all of her power because she was weak. Stripped it all, and he punished her. He says, because of your what you did here, no life's gonna grow on you anymore. Nothing's gonna grow from you. And that's your punishment. You're gonna be stuck here. And because of you, all women are gonna have a cycle where they bleed to remember what you did. This is gonna be your punishment. And so that's how we get the moon. There's nothing there from it. Going back to where I think that, ties in with demons, that snake man, how he was able to come up. I think these things are really old spirits, from the beginning of time as we know it. That's where they come from. That's what I think, and, it's just fun to think about, but I've always kind of wondered that because people do see these spirits that look like reptilian men, It is a thing, so I've always wondered what that is. And that's where I suspect it comes from.
Yeah, and again, I hear a lot of parallels in these stories to, Genesis and the early stories or the early books of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And and I think that's why conversations like this are important, because you hear a lot of people say, well, there's so many religions in the world, or there, whatever, they can't all be right. But when you start breaking them down like this, they're all kind of saying the same thing.
Yeah. I think it all goes back to us being one people at one time. We've all kept a little bit of it. That's what I think.
Yeah. Yeah. That I love this. This is great. I don't even know how to segue out of this.
Well, that's why, like, when we introduce ourselves, like when I do, we always say "oki" or "hello" in Neek Sokoaks. Hello, my friends and relatives. Everyone's related, and that's what we're talking about. I'm saying hello to my friends and to everybody in the world, my relatives.
Yeah, I like that. I do. That's and I do consider you one of my friends, so
Yeah,
that works.
likewise. Yeah.
I still need to figure out how I'm getting out to Montana though, so you can take me to that hole in the wall.
Yeah, that's gonna be interesting. I really want to go there too and check it out. I know where it's at, but I never dinked around in there. It's one of the mysteries I want to, explore in my lifetime.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I had a couple other questions, and we'll try to get this back to the paranormal, because that's what people listen to my show for.
Yeah.
But so you've listened to my encounter with what I call the thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot of people give me different opinions on what that might have been, but we talked, I think through text message about this, and could you tell everybody what you think I saw was?
Well, I don't know if you could kind of remind me a little bit about it.
It was just
I
a
know
torso.
Yeah, I know what you were saying, but like, so when you seen it, the one detail I guess I'm kind of needing to remind of was you were driving and it was beside the road, or was it on the road?
It was on the road. It was in the center of the road.
Yeah. See, we have an old story of an old spirit similar to that, right? And like what you've seen. And so that one is called Dragging His Entrails Full of Dirt, right? And that's kind of what I think you've seen, was maybe you've seen that one or something like that, right? Now, this spirit, the only thing it eats is um it eats an unborn child from a woman. That's what it eats. And it's really a bad one. It's really a bad one. And how we did away with it in our stories was when it came to this woman and this man, and it ate that woman's baby and killed her. He found it. He tracked it down, and he grabbed it, and he impaled it on a stump. Right. So if people don't understand what, I'll just describe it. This thing only has two arms, and its rib cage is exposed, and its lower half's gone, and it drags its entrails, and they're all full of dirt. So it takes one step, if you will, with both hands on the ground, and then it swings its body, and then it lands on its rib cage and rocks forward, takes another step with both hands, swings its rib cage out and rocks forward. That's how it walks. And so he was able to catch it. It wasn't very fast, and when he caught it, he impaled it on a stump, and it couldn't get out of that. It couldn't leave that stump. It was stuck there. So that's how we got rid of it. But people say when you're out and you're hunting in the mountains, on the corner of your eye, sometimes you'll see something moving, and when you look, it's just a stump. But they say that's what you're seeing. You're seeing that dragging his entrails full of dirt. That's like one of the original ghost stories that we have in our tribe. These bad
And I
things.
find, I think it's amazing because we're going back to this, you know, your creation stories lining up with, like I said, Christianity. Now you tell this story about dragging entrails full of dirt, and I had a guest on my show that was talking about this half person and it was from the Philippines, and it fed on unborn babies.
Yeah.
And this is a story from the Philippines. You're telling this story from, the Americas. And again, we have this synchronicity. You have these two totally different people, but they have a similar story. That's basically the same thing. And that, to me, that's not a coincidence. There, to me, that shows that there is something to this story. And, of course, I saw this thing. I didn't see the entrails or, anything like that. I only saw, basically from the belly button up. But, that it goes back to that, if you have so many people seeing the same things on that, don't have contact with each other, there has to be something to it. And that's what I find fascinating about this entire subject, with the paranormal, religion. You have these overlapping stories. And when you text me about this dragging entrails full of dirt, my jaw basically hit the floor because I had heard of this tick is what they call it in the Philippines. And it's the same creature. And it's like that's not a coincidence. People are seeing these things. And I just, all this just fascinates me. And so far, what you describe as, this creature lines up the most to what I saw. And, I can't say that it kind of gives me closure on it, but I feel like I'm on the right path now to finding out what I saw. So So yeah,
But it's validating.
right. I guess that's the word I was looking for. Validation. You know, that it was something. I'm like, there's no way that this can't exist. And you hear my story and you come back with, oh no, that's what this is. And it's like, holy cow. I'm not going crazy. Um, I really do think that's what I saw that night. And, um, you know, it does make me feel a little better about it. I don't want to see it again, but, you know, at least I feel better knowing that it wasn't, that other people have seen this thing. So I want to say thank you for that.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, like on my end, when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, this land is really, really old. And my tribe didn't we actually came from the east, on the east side of North America, and we migrated out west. There are stories of how we pushed out the other people that were here for the territory. We're all competing for hunting territory. And so you've seen this over that way somewhere. Our tribe was actually over there too, a long time ago on that side, but further north. So in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, this could be that old spirit. It could still be around. I mean, because spirits don't die. There's no way for them to die like that, not of old age, anyways. So there's there's something to that too. I think in my mind, I'm thinking more and more with these old stories from our tribe. I get validation too in different ways. More and more as I live, they're validated. For instance, like the story of the moon. There is a theory out there that there was an impact that hit the earth, and that's how the moon was formed. Well, in our story, the creator hit her with that axe, and there she was. She was left to be outside with nothing growing on her anymore, you know? And I'm really curious because there's more to that story. When those seven boys went up, they became star people. They're the Big Dipper. That's who they are. They're the Big Dipper in our ways, our stories. And the sun, of course, is a star, and that's who we look at as the creator. Not the physical ball of nuclear fusion that's warming us up. That's just the body, the physical side of it, but the spirit, the life force that's within that really is our creator. It really, like, physically is our creator. We are made from stardust. That's how we're made. Everything is. And so that's what we look at, right? And anyways, this when you hear these old stories and then you look at the science behind a lot of these, it's really, really fascinating to me. And I'll go a step further. There's one old story about the headdress constellation that we call. In that constellation, there's what is it, 26 stars that you can see with the naked eye, and that's what the headdress is actually based on. And so there's 26 feathers in it, whatever. So but in the old stories, they say, no, there are more up there. There's like 50 some. We just can't see them. And when your telescopes are invented, well, there you go. There's 50 some in that cluster. And I don't remember what it's called in English. But how do they know these things? And also that the continent is shaped like a turtle. And a lot of natives call it Turtle Island. How do they know that? There's no way so I'm saying, like, a lot of these old stories, they get validated too. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, I'm looking up the constellation. Oh, that's not what I want.
I don't know if it's even going to be there because we just refer to it as a headdress constellation, and I can't remember what it's called in English, and I don't know if it'll ever be referred to as that on the internet or anywhere like that because these are like old stories. They're
Right.
not published, I would say, to the internet anyways.
Yeah, it keeps giving me it's not it's giving me basically like hats that have stars on them. I don't think that's what you're talking about.
No,
But
no.
we're gonna have to dig into that one a little more to figure out which one we're talking about. But yeah, and you're talking about we're all made from stardust and stuff. Science has proven that, that when these comets and stuff come by, they have the building blocks that we need for life. So it again, it's all these things going in circles, and it fascinates me. Absolutely fascinates me.
Yeah.
So so let's try to get back to the paranormal. I know I've probably lost some people that were thinking they were going to get cryptids and things like that.
Okay.
So when in one of the previous interviews, you talked about things like rock spirits and water spirits,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure that not a lot of my listeners would understand what you're talking about. So maybe we could go into those instead of, like Bigfoot or anything like that everybody talks about. I kind of want to talk about some of these lesser known spirits.
Yeah. So I guess we could start with the water spirits. They're really powerful spirits. They're really powerful. There's outside of my tribe, I don't see a lot of recognition for them. I don't think people really realize that that's a thing, that they're there all around us. And because after a rainstorm, when there's a little tiny puddle right there that you just walk by, there's a sweet to be in that too. Every little thing of water, there's a spirit in it. And some of these stories that have happened, this place in Forehorn Lake, they're on the north side of it. Um, my wife's grandma was talking about it. She's 100 years old and she's still alive. She said in the 40s, she said, was the last time I remember anybody really seeing, like a lot of people really seeing those what we call water dogs, but they're a water spirit. And she said, this guy was standing over there. See, my grandpa, Owl Child, he had a ranch there. He had a house, a homestead out there too. And so he had cows. There was cows around there, and they thought maybe one of the cows died and was just kind of floating, because that's how it looked. I always envision a manatee is what they're seeing. Big, something big like that. Well, it was floating around out there, and the wind kind of pushes it one way, so everything kind of drifts up on that one side, and it wasn't there. It started going out in the middle of that lake. There was multiple of them too, and finally it just kind of went under and wasn't seen again. Those things weren't seen again. But I guess she was talking about that. My father-in-law was telling me she was talking about that at one time, and he also said there was another lady up at Mittens Lake that's near the mountains. Um, it's a kind of a popular place to go. There's fishing derbies up there, things like that. And one of these times they were up there doing that camp or fishing or something like that up there, and she kept hearing this little bark. And she went down and she seen this creature, uh, and she picked it up. I guess it had fur on it and everything. I always imagine a baby seal. I don't know why. And when I hear this story, but when my father-in-law has told it to me a couple times now, and he said, yeah, she picked this little thing up. She said it was one of those water dogs, but she didn't know it. Said she even took it home. And I don't know, he said, what made her do it, but she brought it back and let it go back in that water, and it went under and it was gone. But, you know, we're not talking about, because we know what animals are. We know what otters are, things like that. We know those muskrat, whatever, beaver. It wasn't any of those. It was one of those water dogs, what we call them, and she didn't even know she had one of those, and she let it go because it was a spirit. But she's able to pick it up, bring it home, all these things, and it was a spirit though, and she put it back in there and let it go. So another time, here's this river called um, Birch Creek, and there's a little bridge that goes over it that leads off to res. Once you cross that river, you're off the res. And one time, my wife was driving, and she was going back to, I want to say, college. She went to college in Wyoming, and she was driving off the res and heading south. Well, she took that road, that back road off the res, and that 7 Mile Lane, where there's a whole set of ghost stories that follow that area too. But as she was driving across that bridge, she looked over and she seen one of those water dogs, she said. And she said it just ran across the top of that water. Like it just ran across the top of that little river there and stopped on that bank and was looking around. And she said, that's all I seen. I said, well, how big was it? She said, it's about the size of a calf. But it just ran right across the top of the water. She said, I couldn't believe what I seen. I kind of slowed down and like, you know, getting ready. Because in that area when you're cruising, you can't really stop because it abruptly turns to gravel. So she like slowed down and lost sight of it, and it was gone after, she got to looking for it. It didn't reappear, but she seen it run across the top of that water. That'd be crazy. But anyways,
You
she's
say
seen
this
one.
this was as big as a baby cow?
Yeah, a calf. Yeah, it was as big as that. Remember, I was talking about those other water dogs that were in that lake were big, like cows. They thought they were dead cows floating.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of the, you know, because there's different types of spirits that come from the water. You know, you got Suitapis and Okitapiks. So you got water spirits, you got water people that come from the water. And the water people are really, really powerful too. They're really powerful. That's where we say we originally got the horse from, was from one of those water people gave us the horse. They had horses to begin with, and the horses come from the water. And if you have a horse and you have to cross the water, they're amazing in the water. People don't really know that either, but horses are really good in the water. So
Yeah,
that's where it's
I've ridden horses and swam across rivers, and that they do swim very well.
hmm that's where they say they come from. But those see, um, I'm debating on if I should share this next story. I'll trim a lot of it out. Uh, okay, so there was a time in my life where it was really, really tough, and I had did everything I could do, and I I didn't know how to overcome these obstacles I was having, but I tried. I tried everything I could. There was nothing I didn't, do. I sacrificed till I couldn't sacrifice anymore, trying to overcome these certain obstacles in my life. Well, one of the spiritual leaders of my tribe came to me and he told, he knew what was going on. And so he told me, he said, how can I say this without, in a nutshell, I can't tell you exactly what we do. I shouldn't share that on a platform like this. But in a nutshell, he sent me to those water people to ask them to help me with these things that were going on, and so I did. And when I did that, and I gave it all to them, everything worked out the way it was supposed to after that. Those obstacles were overcome, and everything smoothed out in my life. So these different things that are here, that's what I'm saying, those water spirits are really, really powerful. I mean, they're so powerful that they can change your life. It's amazing with the what's here and what can help us that a lot of us don't even realize is here or is even a thing. And I'm so thankful that my ancestors that survived all of these hardships kept those things for us, kept this knowledge alive for us. Or else I don't know where I'd be without a lot of that in my life. So anyways, that's one of the more, I guess, intimate for me stories about these water spirits. They're really powerful, and there's also stories of them. I can't share certain ones because they're too, what we say, holy. They're holy. I can't really talk about some of this, but just know that they are there and they are powerful. And one other story I can share though is so on my wife's their family ranch, their grandparents' ranch. That ranch land's still there. They still stay there. Well, one of these winters, her cousin, she was raised together with him, so they're like brother and sister. He was telling me, he said, yeah, you know, her grandma's brother, their great uncle, and their grandpa. So the husband and the brother-in-law, they were out and they were punching holes in the little river that's near there for the horses and the cows one winter. And he had like this, it was a pitchfork or it was a like a spade or something, and he was, trying to get through that. And when he punched through, he just started walking back and he was kind of shook up, and all he was saying was sweet to sweet to be, and he didn't really want to stay there. And I guess what ended up happening was when he busted through that ice, he hit one of those sweet peas. he he hit it and it kind of freaked him out, and he just walked away from it, just dropped everything and walked back up to the house. Didn't want to be there anymore. When they start looking around, I guess it was gone, but he thought he killed it. That's really odd on how you could kill a spirit, but he thought he did because he hit it when he punched through the ice and just got out of there. So
So he saw this spirit
yeah,
then. Oh,
yeah.
wow.
So it looked like a man. It was like a man. So maybe it's an Okitapi, but he seen him and he thought he had killed him. And he just left and was saying, water spirit, water spirit, water spirit, shaking his head, walking away.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
Wow.
And
So
so,
you also had brought up unless you had more about the water spirits.
well, just know that they're really, the water plays a big part in life, everybody's lives, whether we realize it or not. And it's not like a lot of the ceremonies, like that sweat lodge. Water's a big part of that. I just kind of wanted to make that point. But yeah, go ahead.
So one of the other things that you had brought up in passing in one of the previous interviews were rock spirits.
Yeah. So again, sweat lodge rocks. They're really powerful. Those spirits are. And so when I was a kid, like the first time I really kind of, I guess it opened my eyes, was I was getting ready to go into the Marine Corps and I was scared. And I thought maybe I wouldn't make it back alive. And so I was worried. And I went to my grandpa and I voiced my concerns. And he says, all right, well, I'll go tell, you know, one of our other spiritual leaders that he was raised with. He said, I'll go tell him. And so he told him, and he says, he told me to tell you he wants you to come out to his sweat. He's having a sweat at this time to come out, and he's going to help you. And so what I asked for was protection. Like, Grandpa, can you maybe ask him for protection for me or something before I leave? And so I went to that sweat, and I remember when we were standing there before the sweat started, he was showing us, he was teaching us, boys, this is how you do this part. And when you start this, you start like this. And then you do this. Then you do this. And it was just that old man and all of us young boys. None of us were out of high school or anything yet. We're all, I think I was a senior in high school. We were just kids. And he was just showing us different things about how you build that and start it and everything. And we had to wait for those rocks to get hot. And he was standing there. And we were just kind of all visiting, laughing. It's always happy times when you're doing these. It's really a happy time. It's just uplifting. So you're always in a good mood. Well, he got quiet and he was staring at those rocks. He made this sound. He said he's gonna. I'll mimic it. He's going, oh, ooh, like that, and he was staring at those rocks. He says, "Those rocks are really talking." He said, "This is gonna be a really good sweat." They're just talking, and we just stopped and all stared at him. But he was on a different level than us. He had different insights. He knew secrets of the universe that we never knew. And so he could hear these things happening, those spirits, he could hear them a lot of times. And so when we go into that sweat finally, I can't talk about what happened in there exactly. I can't even allude to things. I just can't, there's no way to skirt this. So long story short, I got the protection I needed, and everything that was involved in that whole thing, I look back and I look at it. The rocks were there, the water, the fire, and the air, and all of us, all these elements were there. And that's like the first time I really had my eyes open to how powerful they are, because what happened in that sweat after he was talking about how good of a sweat this was going to be and how powerful it was going to be. He wasn't wrong. Let me put it that way. He wasn't wrong. And so that right there really, really opened my eyes. And I still have that protection today. I still have it. I just can't talk about really what it is. It's not for anybody else like that. So I can't really, say. But there are other things too with these rock spirits. There's different kinds. And a long time ago when this happened, this woman, I want to say her name was Feather Woman. Um, she was like the wife that worked, you know. She was like the second wife of this man, and she was the one that had to go out and get wood, things like that. And so she was out getting wood, and she kept hearing this singing, and there was some singing, she's hearing it, and she finally followed that little voice that was singing, and she gets up to it, and it's a little rock, and it's singing, and it tells her, I'm going to teach you these songs. I'm going to teach you this. And when you learn these songs and you learn what I'm about to show you here, all you got to do is repeat it, and all those buffalo will come close. They'll come close to your camp so that you can harvest them. But I can call the buffalo for you. And so she learned that, and she brought that back. And she showed those men what it could do and what happened. And after that, they would use these, and we call them iniskums, or buffalo rocks, buffalo stones. And they would use them to call the buffalo into them so that they could get them easier, and those are still around today. They're still here today. And what it is, us as humans, we have a spirit within our bodies, and we're self-aware of ourselves. A blade of grass might not be so self-aware of itself, but it does have a spirit, or a tree even. All right, rocks, same thing. They might not be self-aware. The actual life force that's in those rocks might not be. In these rocks, they are. They're self-aware, and they they know, and so you have to feed them, things like that, right? You have to feed them, and they're still around today. Um, I'm not going to say how many, but I have some here in my house. I own one. My two sons own one. And there's others too. I'm not going to say how many total is in our family or anything, but you know, there's a few here. And,
Yeah.
I don't know why I don't know. It's just a blessing, I guess you can look at it.
There for a couple times, I felt like you were opening up more than maybe you wanted to, and I just want to make sure that that I never want my guests to feel like I'm putting them on the spot and they have to answer these questions, and that's not where we're at. So we've talked about water spirits and rock spirits. Now I'm not even sure where to go from here.
Well, one more story about those rocks. I could tell you one more.
Okay.
Same thing. My wife's cousin, who's like her brother, same guy. He was riding out to the lake because Four-Horn Lake is just over this ridge and down this little valley, and you'll get to that lake. That's how close my wife's family lives to the place today. And one time he was riding back on his horse, and he was just, so what happened was his horses. He was chasing them back, and they all kind of split, and he kind of had to like take this like shortcut around to try and round them back up. He had this one horse that was really smart and it would always guide them, it would always elude them, that herd that they have. Well, as he was going up this other way, he noticed this rock was on the ground, and his horse starts shying away. His horse starts shying away from that, and that area. And he just kind of kept riding, kind of went a little ways around it and just kept going. And as soon as he passed kind of close to that rock, um, he said he said that rock wasn't a real rock like that. He said it was a person, and it was sitting on its butt, and it was hugging its knees, and it had its head down, and it looked up and it went, "Hey." And when it did that, that horse went to bucking and it threw him off. When it threw him off, he hit the ground hard, like kind of. He said, "I even kind of hit my head." He said, and I'm laying there, I'm like, "Oh crap!" And he's trying to get up, and he says, he looks over, and that rock spirit said, "Hey, are you all right?" And he jumps up and like, just kind of like moves away, like, what the hell's going on here? Looking at him, and he just put his head back down, and it looked like a rock again. There was no way he could. I don't know. It didn't move anymore after that. But another time, almost the same exact scenario. Um, he was riding in late, and he was just crossing over the ridge, and he seen this person running, and he thought, "Oh, geez, that's probably my, Uncle so and so, because he likes to run out here. I'm gonna try and catch him." And so he started trying to catch him. He said, "Man, I got over that ridge because I seen him cross over, so I started whipping both sides. I got up there quick, and I was just getting ready to run him down and ask what he was doing." And he said, "Geez, I noticed as I was getting closer to him," he says, "it wasn't my uncle. I don't know who it was." He says, "but he was just shrinking. He was just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So finally, it wasn't even tall, like maybe a foot and a half tall or so. And he seen me behind him. He'd look back, see me chasing him, running him down." He said, when he got really small like that, he just turned abruptly to the right and just dove right into that. There's like a little bank. He just dove right into that, and he was a rock at that point. That was another one of those rock stories about, those spirits.
That is awesome. That is
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, Rod, I tell you what, we could probably sit here and talk for the entire night. But I think we're at a little over an hour right now. So I think this would probably be a good place to stop for this interview.
Okay.
And maybe we can do this again, because I mean, I feel like like I said, I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours, and this stuff just it absolutely fascinates me, because I love learning about different cultures, and of course, I love the paranormal,
Mm-hmm.
and to me, anything that's outside the normal is paranormal. So for me, all of this is paranormal. So maybe we can set up another time down the road here,
Yeah.
and we could do this again, or maybe we can make this a regular thing where we just sit down and talk, once a month or something like that, and share some stories. But
Yeah.
before we go, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody where they can find Lodge Tales? And yeah.
Yeah, you can find Lodge Tales anywhere you get your podcasts. It's on Spotify, uh, Audible, anywhere like that. I mean, you can find your podcast there, my podcast. It's on YouTube. I kick out videos from I'm forgetting what's it called. My platform is Red Circle, and it kicks out a YouTube video, so I get a YouTube video off of that as well. And I have the Facebook group called Lodge Tales, where we have a few ghost stories in our chat room, but usually I make announcements there. It's really not, set up to be this big active hub. There's just a few people in there, and sometimes we share ghost stories. So I mean, but what that's there for mainly is to get in contact with me. If you're Indigenous and you have stories, that's one place to do it. And of course on TikTok, I'm active on there as well. I like going into other paranormal lives and you know, listening to stories for one, because I really like hearing stories of spirits in particular, and just, listening to stories of Bigfoot, things like that. So I'm active on TikTok as well, and it's the same thing. It's called Lodge Tales Podcast on TikTok. And I have a few snippets of my podcast on my page there. And I mean, those are the places you could contact me. Also, I have a website, lodgetales.com, and that posts the podcast, the free episodes anyways. And if you want the members only content, you have to become a member on Patreon. And I usually save the really good interviews, what I think are the juicy ones for that, because I believe that if you're going to pay for a podcast, man, you should get some really good stuff. And that's kind of my way of looking at that. So I reserve the best for that. And everything else is for everybody. But even the free episodes for everybody are really, really good. I mean, I've done 60 episodes now, and they all have something for somebody. They're all really good. I mean, if you like the paranormal, that's probably something that might interest you. But to forewarn everyone, I'm self-taught, so there was a learning curve. Not all the audio is the best. But you still get the idea. You still get the stories, and it's kind of, I guess, all that matters in the end.
And I feel that about the audio, and it is a big learning curve when you just come into this not knowing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I was listening to your first time when you came into the live, when I had my Santa shirt on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that compared to what this audio will sound like, man, it's horrible. It really is. But I have a lot of good content that I've gotten from those lives that I still haven't released yet. So, people are going to have to bear with it for just a little while longer until we get caught up. But yeah, I get it. The audio is it's hard. It really is.
Definitely a curve there, man.
Absolutely. Well, Rod, I really do appreciate you coming in tonight, and I will see you on TikTok Live this Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern time.
All right, we'll see you. If I don't make it there, I'm just getting back from work and I'll be in late.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, see ya.
And that's it for tonight. I'd like to thank Rod from Lodge Tales Podcast for coming back in and doing a one-on-one interview with me. And I'm sure we'll hear from him in the future. If you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share, you can contact me at mythsandmullets@gmail.com, and maybe you can be on the show. Have a good night.